We stand here today in a moment heavy with shock, disbelief, and grief. Only a few days ago, the news broke that Charlie Kirk, a conservative activist, broadcaster, writer, and one of the most outspoken voices in American politics, was killed. He was only 31 years old. The setting was tragically ordinary, a university campus, a hall where students had gathered, where questions were being asked, where ideas were colliding. He had done this dozens, if not hundreds of times before. Yet on September 10th, 2025, at Utah Valley University, during one of his signature Prove Me Wrong debates, his life was ended with a single gunshot. The attacker struck from a distance, a cold and calculating act that left no room for words, no space for rebuttal, no chance for healing through dialogue. Charlie was rushed to the hospital, but the wound was fatal, and so we are left here, stunned. The shock of the moment. When public figures pass away, it is often after long careers, illness, or the slow march of time. But this was sudden, violent, and senseless. A man who made his living with words was silenced by a weapon. And perhaps what shocks us most is the setting, a university. Universities are supposed to be bastions of learning, of discussion, of testing ideas against one another. The very heart of democracy beats in classrooms and lecture halls, where young people learn to disagree without violence. And yet, in such a place, the opposite occurred. Instead of debate, there was destruction. Instead of free speech, there was a gunshot. This moment compels us to look deeper. It forces us to ask, what does this say about our nation, about our discourse, about the way we see one another? Sixth, who Charlie Kirk was. To understand the magnitude of this loss, we must recall who Charlie Kirk was. Born in 1993, he grew up in the Chicago suburbs. By the age of 18, while most young people were only beginning to explore college life, Kirk had already founded Turning Point USA, an organization dedicated to spreading conservative ideas on college campuses. His energy and drive propelled him quickly into the spotlight. He was a podcaster, a writer, a frequent guest on television, and eventually the face of a movement aimed at mobilizing young conservatives. To his supporters, he was bold, unafraid to speak against what he saw as liberal orthodoxy in academia and media. To his critics, he was provocative, sometimes confrontational, a man whose rhetoric sparked heated controversy. But whether loved or opposed, Charlie Kirk could not be ignored. He brought politics into the lives of countless young Americans. He filled auditoriums. He sparked conversations at kitchen tables. He inspired both passionate agreement and fierce rebuttal. That was his gift and his burden, to live as a public figure in a polarized age. But beyond the politics, he was also a husband and father. His family now mourns not just a leader, but a loved one, a son, a brother, a friend, a young man whose life was cut far too short. Third, the broader implications. Charlie Kirk's death is not just about the loss of one man. It represents something larger, something deeply troubling about the path we are on as a society. Political violence on the rise. In recent years, the United States has witnessed an alarming increase in politically motivated threats and attacks. From attempted assassinations to violent protests, the sense that one can solve disagreements with a weapon has crept into our culture. Kirk's death is not an isolated incident. It is part of a dangerous pattern. Democracy depends on words, not bullets. When bullets replace words, democracy itself is in peril. The erosion of civil spaces. If universities, places meant for the free exchange of ideas, can no longer guarantee safety, then where can citizens safely debate? If a public figure cannot speak without fear of violence, how many others will choose silence over speech? This is not just about Charlie Kirk. This is about every student, every teacher, every citizen who values dialogue, polarization, and dehumanization. In our public life today, rhetoric is sharp, often cruel. Opponents are not simply wrong. They are demonized, mocked, portrayed as enemies of the nation itself. This environment dehumanizes those with whom we disagree. And when someone is dehumanized, violence against them seems, to the disturbed or extreme, somehow justified. We must face this reality. The words we use, the ways we describe one another, matter. They set the tone for what follows. A call to reflection. The death of Charlie Kirk is a tragedy, but it is also an opportunity to stop, to reflect, and to ask ourselves what kind of nation we want to be. Do we want to live in a society where disagreement is punished with violence? Do we want a future where our children grow up afraid to voice their beliefs? Or do we want to renew our commitment to civility, to respect, to the principle that in America we settle our differences with words, with ballots, with arguments, never with bullets? This is the challenge before us. Honoring his legacy. How do we honor Charlie Kirk's legacy? For some, honoring him means continuing his political mission, carrying forward his conservative message, building on the work of Turning Point USA. For others, honoring him means recommitting to the value of debate, of engaging across differences, even when we strongly disagree. But perhaps the greatest way to honor him is to ensure that no one else suffers the same fate. To make sure that the next student speaker, the next activist, the next teacher, the next politician, regardless of ideology, can speak without fear of being killed for it. V6. Lessons from history. History reminds us that violence against public figures is not new. Abraham Lincoln was shot for his leadership in ending slavery. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated for his dream of racial equality. Robert F. Kennedy, John Lennon, even more recently, attacks on members of Congress. Every time, the pattern is the same. A life ended, a nation in shock, and a choice to make. Do we descend further into division, or do we rise, together, with renewed commitment to justice, to peace, to freedom? Charlie Kirk's death now joins that tragic list. But the story is not yet finished. The way we respond, as individuals, as communities, as a country, will determine whether his death deepens the darkness or sparks new light. On a personal note. Allow me to speak not as a commentator, not as a politician, but as a fellow human being. Charlie Kirk's politics may not have been everyone's politics. His style may not have been everyone's style. But he was a human being, and every human life has value. When a 31-year-old is taken, we are reminded that life is fragile, precious, and fleeting. We are reminded that beyond debates, beyond ideologies, we are all bound by our common humanity. For his family, the pain is unbearable. For his friends and colleagues, the loss is immeasurable. And for the rest of us, it is a sobering wake-up call. V8. Moving forward. So where do we go from here? Justice must be pursued. The investigation must be thorough, transparent, and relentless. The shooter must be found, motives understood, and accountability ensured. Political leaders must rise above division. This is not the time for cheap shots or partisan point scoring. It is a time for unity in condemning violence, wherever it comes from, whoever it targets. Citizens must recommit to civil discourse. That means listening as well as speaking. That means disagreeing without dehumanizing. That means remembering that political opponents are still fellow Americans, still neighbors, still human beings. Protecting public spaces must become a priority. Universities, town halls, churches, rallies, these must remain safe spaces for speech and assembly. Security measures matter, but so do cultural measures, respect, restraint, and responsibility. Conclusion. From mourning to action. We gather today in mourning, but we must not stop there. Mourning must lead to action. Grief must lead to renewal. Out of tragedy must come commitment. Let us commit to building a culture where ideas are exchanged, not extinguished. Let us commit to protecting the freedoms that allow voices like Charlie Kirk's and all voices to be heard. Let us commit to rejecting violence, no matter our politics, no matter our differences. Charlie Kirk is gone. His voice is silent, but the challenge he leaves us is clear. To keep alive the spirit of debate, the courage of free speech, and the belief that we can be a nation where disagreement does not destroy us, but makes us stronger. May we meet that challenge. May we honor his memory. And may his tragic death not be the end of dialogue, but the beginning of a better chapter for us all. Thank you.